Hello, and welcome to Character Class. Today, because there was some interest in it um, from a video that I put out talking about the future of my channel, somebody had made mention of a video on running Changeling the Dreaming, because there wasn't one on my list, my playlist of Character Class videos, so I thought I would remedy that by doing one talking about some of the less rules oriented parts of the game. A lot of the stuff that some people might have difficulty with, some people might not quite be able to wrap their head around it. So we're going to delve into some of those. Because rules are rules. They're all printed down in the book. You can take them or leave them. You don't have to use any of them. Like the magic system in Changing the Dreaming, for example, is one that is quite complex. Not as complex as Mage, but it runs on a whole system of you need to not only have the art, the art as they call it, that type of magic, and then it only does a specific thing. But then you not only have to have that, but you also have to have the appropriate realms to be able to cast it on a person or yourself or an object or an entire place or multiple people. Like, there's specific realms that you need to sink points into to be able to use your magic to affect the things around you. It's definitely a little interesting. But that is a sort of thing that, as a storyteller, you are able to just not use if you want to. Or you can read up on it and you can figure out what you want to do and you can go for it. But we're getting off topic. If we had gotten on topic to begin with. So let's talk about Changing the Dreaming and some things. And the first thing that I want to talk about is the dreaming as a whole. Now, the dreaming is a place that exists. It's another realm that changelings kind of come from and have a strong connection to. Much like werewolves having a connection to the Umbra, changelings have a connection to the dreaming. And in some of the books, the changeling exists as a realm in and of itself, contained somewhere in the Umbra. It is a kind of a spiritual realm, but it is a realm of dreams. It is a realm of the mind, of the subconscious mind. And I believe it is made up of the subconscious dreaming minds of everyone on Earth. And as such, it changes. It is a place where logic does not really apply, not by the real world standards. Logic does not come into things. What happens in the dreaming is more akin to like strange acid trips in a way, or the weird narratives that your mind can come up with while you're sleeping. For those who don't really dream, like a narrative could be you, like you're dreaming that you're in a place that's familiar to you, but then all of a sudden something weird happens, and then everything around you shifts, and the story is now dealing with whatever this weird thing that has now intruded, as if the previous reality is no longer there. Uh, so when you're dealing with the dreaming and you're wanting to run stuff in the dreaming, keep this in mind. There are books out there that delve into the dream logic of dreams, as well as some video games and movies that will showcase the strangeness of dreams. These are things, resources that you should look up. I don't know any of them off the top of my head, except maybe Control. There's a few little areas in Control, that video game by Remedy, where you go to a hotel that runs on dream logic, and things are very weird. Come to think of it, Alan Wake 2 might also do stuff with dreams and that sort of uh, weird narrative. So keep it in mind when you are having characters go into the dreaming or enter the dreaming that it will not run on real world. Now, there are sections of the dreaming that are much, much closer to the waking world and the real world, and those you might ground a little more in reality, and that's okay. But usually, the deeper you get into the dreaming, the less and less bound by the laws of the real world it becomes, and the more bound by the laws of dreams and change, and things will shift drastically. Like, keep this in mind. The second part of this is the real world. And unfortunately, with the real world comes something called banality. Now, the real world is just the real world. It is what we see all around us. And in the world of darkness, it is a darker thing. But the real world is, and I use this in quotation marks, the real world. Because when it comes to changelings, and we'll get into this in a little bit, but when it comes to changelings, the real world is what they have to put up with. But their existence is something else. And I'm going to get into this. Don't worry. But when it comes to the real world, it's there, but it's not something that they want to really concern themselves with. It is an unfortunate and necessary tolerance that they put up with. But banality is something else. Banality is what happens when the real world gets to be too toxic. And I don't mean this in like toxic behavior. What I mean is, to a changeling, the dreaming is what they are tied to, and they get their power off of, like, their life energy is through glamour, through stories and creativity. This is what they thrive. They're always trying to make the world a more wonderful place. And this has gotten Changing the Dreaming a bit of a, I don't want to say a bad reputation, but it's definitely gotten it a reputation as being one of the lighter and fluffier um, World of Darkness systems. And I can see where people are getting that, but Changeling is just as dark as Vampire and Werewolf and Mage and Wraith. And even Hunter. Like, Changeling is just as dark as all of them. The main difference is the storyteller who runs the game and how they want to portray it. because you can do real fun stuff. Now, the toxic part of banality comes in when the real world is being like soul crushing. Like there is a insidiousness to the soul crushing job in a corporate office, sitting in a cubicle. Your life is basically at the whims of your boss. Like this sort of banality, or the banality of somebody who is like absolutely obsessed to the point of nothing else with World of Warcraft, and that's all they play. Or they're obsessed with this fandom, and that's all they ever talk about. Like, to some, they would look at this and go, well, these people are, you can't call them banal, but yes, you can. Because that stratification, that calcification of them, of their interests, of their life, is an aspect of banality. And banality is absolutely toxic and absolutely poison to changelings. And they will not want to stick around anywhere that is extremely banal. So keep in mind when you are coming up with your city and figuring out where to put things, where to put freeholds, that you don't put them in a part of the city that is ripe with banality. You want to have it in a part of the city that is creative and inspirational and so on. This is what you want to aim for. Now, as I was mentioning about the life of changelings and how they delve into things, this leads me to the opposite of the real world. And this touches on the dreaming in a way. But that is chimerical reality. And chimerical reality, as you can see on screen, is spelled like chimera, the beast of Greek legend. And chimerical reality is kind of broken down into two separate things. You have like chimerical items, and then you have chimerical beings. Now, changelings exist as a chimerical being, but that chimerical being is tied to a person that has to exist in the real world. That person is their mortal seeming, while their chimerical self is their fei mien, or main mien. I never know how to pronounce that word, but it's their fey seeming, you could say. Now, their chimerical aspect exists in chimerical reality, but not in the real world. The mortal shell exists in the real world, but not in chimerical reality. And the chimerical aspect of people can be vastly different than their mortal self. You could have someone who is like 5'6", for example, in the real world, and in chimerical reality, they are a 7'2" troll. Now, what does this mean? This means that this changeling, this troll, is almost 2 feet taller than his mortal self would be in the real world. So if this 5'2" or 5'6" person has to get into a space that it would be too big for a 7'2" troll to get into. They can still do it, but in order to do this, they have to deny their chimerical self. They have to ignore that they are that big in order to fit, and this will cause them damage. Because if you ignore your chimerical self, if you ignore chimerical reality, you are being banal or banal. You are being banal, and as such will likely take banality into yourself, which will cause all kinds of problems. Banality is bad. You don't want to do that. So, because of this, chimerical beings are things that can, in essence, move through the real world unseen by mundane people. Now, changelings, unfortunately, have a mortal seeming, so they are visible, but other things are not. Chimerical items, such as weapons and armor that the changelings are wearing, don't look like weapons and armor to mortal, mundane people, because to them they don't exist. Which leads us to the next point about how, as a changeling, your life, your entire life as a changeling, in chimerical reality, exists on a level that mundane people can't even perceive. Now, there are ways to allow them to perceive this. Certain other supernaturals have ways and means of seeing chimerical reality, but it's not the norm for them. So you have a whole life that exists in chimerical reality that they don't even know about. They can't even perceive it. How do you reconcile that? How do you then make this so that you can live both lives? That's the problem. You can't. And that's why, as a storyteller running a game, this is where you can get a lot of conflict and drama from that interaction of your characters in game having to live double lives. Because when you have them like trying to go to high school, but also being a guard for the Baron's castle, they can't do both. And if they can't do both, one or the other has to suffer. So their grades in school start slipping, so they can do more guard stuff, or they start shirking their guard duty to raise their grades up so they don't get in trouble. That balance, that interconnectedness between what the real world wants from them and what chimerical reality wants from them is where a large part of the conflict and drama will come from in a changeling game. Because a changeling game is all about trying to reconcile that life, these two lives, actually. And not everyone can do it. A lot of changeling games can end in tragedy. Because when it comes to stories, there are really only two types of stories. especially for Changeling the Dreaming, because it deals a lot with like narratives and such. So you're going to have either comedy or tragedy. That's just the way things go. Lastly, because I've been talking for a bit, lastly, I want to talk about a horrible truth. And that horrible truth is that children exist and the horrors that they bring with them. What I mean by that is that in Changeling the Dreaming, your character can be a is it a I think it's a childer? No. It's a I can't remember if it's child. It might be. Um, but a child, a wilder, or a grump. And what that means is what level the mortal seeming is, what age. Because a child is within a certain age, usually preteen. A wilder is teenage years, and a grump is like early to late 20s. The chimerical self of a changeling doesn't tend to survive much longer past late 20s because as people get older, the real world uh, basically wears you down. And this is where some of the darkness that a lot of people don't realize exists within Changeling the Dreaming comes into play. The world literally grinds down your optimism and your wonder. The sheer wonder that you greet the world around you with. Because children, everything is new to them. Everything is brand new and filled with wonder, and it's amazing, and oh, cool, look at that. But the older you get, the less wonder exists because you know more and more about the world. It is hard to hold on to that wonder, that innocence. And as you get older, your perspectives change. Once you hit your teen years, you start to get, rebellious because that's what teens do. And so wilders are often, wilder, hence the name. And then you get to the age old years of being a grump. You've seen it all. You're jaded at the world, cynical and grumpy. And so at a certain point, you can't, you start not being able to experience that wonder. It's harder and harder for you to see joy in the world. And you just kind of slowly but surely fade away. Like it's not even inaccurate to say that a lot of grumps tend to want to go out dying, at least chimerically, because it's better to end burning brightly than to just fade away and be extinguished. And they don't, depending on the type of kith that you want to play, they don't all want that. Some of them do hang on for a little while, but largely on the whole, changelings tend to fade away and new ones come into things. New ones get born. And this is part of the darkness, part of the horrors, but not the only part of the horrors, because we need to talk about one more thing about children existing, because you can have a childer character who is in changeling reality, in chimerical reality, for all intents and purposes, older than they appear. And what does that mean when you're dealing with a World of Darkness campaign and you're dealing with romance? And that is a thing that needs to be handled with care and respect. For the most part, I would say you should not even attempt it. You should not even attempt to try and handle it. I'm not saying that it can't be. Personally, myself, I would rather have a child character who is chimerically older simply not be interested in romance, not be interested in that sort of thing. They have other things to worry about, after all. Because otherwise, you're opening up a big old can of worms. And nothing will sour a campaign anything more than something like that rearing its ugly head. Nobody needs it, and I'm pretty sure nobody wants it. But be aware that that is a thing that can exist in this world because of how things are. Now, another aspect of it is the fact that you will have characters who may be in positions of great power. You may have NPCs who are in positions of power and who are, for all intents and purposes, children. Their mortal self is a child, not even into preteens. And yet they are making decisions that will affect the chimerical reality of things. You may have players in your game playing a child character who is a knight or is an assassin or something along those lines. There's lots of ways it can go. And another thing, the thing to keep in mind with about these types of characters is that you're dealing with children. And one of the things that children have is they haven't fully developed. And so when it comes to dealing with other people, they tend to lack nuance. So you can imagine what happens when you have a child in a position of power who feels themselves wronged by other parties. Somebody has done something to them or caused them pain. So what would a child do? Lash out. A child in a position of power in chimerical reality may very well make a proclamation that these people need to be put to their deaths. Because the morality of children tends to be less gray and more very starkly black and white. What is right and what is wrong is firmly, usually firmly demarcated. And so if they feel they have been wronged, they will be angry. And that can be horrifying. You have somebody who does not have the capability of looking at a situation with proper adult mindset and nuance and then making decisions on it. Making decisions on the lives and welfare of possibly hundreds of others. And you're telling me that type of situation isn't dark? That's not something that could exist and stand toe to toe with a Vampire the Masquerade campaign or a Werewolf the Apocalypse campaign. No, Changeling is definitely dark. Definitely dark. And it's a lot. Oh, I've been going for a half hour. No wonder my voice feels a little bit dry. So I think that's probably going to cover it for now. I just wanted to bring up these points, talk about them, kind of explain things a little bit about some of the more complicated aspects of the game and some of the things that might not occur to people wanting to run it. So I hope I have been informative. I hope I have been entertaining. And until next time, please stay safe. Don't forget to hydrate. If you like what I'm doing, please consider subscribing to the channel, leaving a like and a comment down below. I always like to hear from people. And if you think I should uh, do some more for like maybe running a werewolf campaign, um, running the other ones, please let me know in the comments down below. I may get to talk about them. I am actually feeling more capable of talking about werewolf, even though werewolf is one of my weakest systems with WOD. I'm feeling like I might be able to actually comment on it. So please do all that. And until next time, I've been Pravi, you've been you, and this has been Character Class. And I'll see you next time.